Cool. Love it. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli Nathan, and I'm the project manager for EA Global. I usually work behind the scenes, but they told me I couldn't keep pretending that I'm not responsible anymore. So I'm out here. I'm going to do some quick closing remarks, and then the feedback survey, which is everybody's favorite part of the conference. And then I'm going to hand over to Matt and Kelsey, who are going to have a nice fireside chat here. First off, we already did some whoops, but first off, I want to thank everyone for coming far and wide to what I believe is the largest EA conference we've ever had on the East Coast, with about 1,400 registered attendees. Love it. Now I need to see if this works. It's ready. Ooh. Love it. OK. Before we do the survey, I'm going to do some thank yous. So this is a haphazard photo we took earlier today. There's been many people who have helped us make this event happen, some of whom I'm not going to be able to mention, but some big ones. We have Angelina up here, who's also over here, who put together a high-quality series of talks, workshops, meetups, and a bunch of other things. Ivan, who is over there. Is Ivan here? Where's Ivan? Ivan's over there. Love it. Ivan's been working round the clock on our back-end systems and processes, including our travel support, along with Charlotte Darnell, who is somewhere else, maybe. There we go. Love it. Also up there. And also Amy, who many of you will recognize, who is over there and is the original EA Global queen, but I don't know if she's right here, but we can thank her anyway. Cool. Other people to thank. Let's get it to work. Lovely. Various other groups who've helped. So this is our Laundry Yard's external production company, who've been working around the clock for weeks to try and make this event happen, and we really appreciate their help. Other people, ooh, love it. Also, would love to thank the venue for being very accommodating with our very particular vegan dietary requirements, and our AV and videography teams who are here as well, and love it. And obviously many other groups. Cool. I'd really like to thank our volunteer team. We had around 75 volunteers this time, which is a lot of people. And Charlotte Potts and Hillary, who helped coordinate them. So yeah, really big thank you to all of them, people in blue t-shirts who are here, because we could really not do it without you. Cool. Next, just some quick remarks before the survey. I want to go over a few key things. So one, please, if you can, follow up with any big plans or changes you want to push over this weekend. If you've made commitments, try to keep up with them. Two, if you've made friends or work connections, try to stay in contact with them on LinkedIn, Facebook, something like that. And thirdly, the big one, we'll be having more conferences next year, so encourage many of you to apply for those, and hopefully see many of you at those. Wonderful, and loads of EAGXs in regional areas. But again, thanks everyone for coming, really appreciate it, and now we're going to have Matt and Kelsey.
Planning this session, the first thing I said to Matt was that, that you got to watch the chairs.
I'm tired.
Is that the closing stage at EA Global with all the EAs here is the perfect place to share the most scathing criticisms you have of the EA movement. So what are we getting completely wrong?
Nothing is completely wrong in life, but. So I came here. I don't actually dress like this every day in my life. But I do dress up, if I am going to Capitol Hill, if I'm going to the White House, if I'm going to a lot of kind of stuff that happens around Washington, D.C. And I know it's not like the norm in this group or necessary for people to get all dressed up on a Sunday, but I think it's important to really think about, how do people working on EA projects engage with, I don't know what to say, but they're like normal people and the normal conventions of the normal world, and to acknowledge that, some of this stuff you may agree or disagree or whatever, but it's the way that people do things, it's the way that people are expected to behave, and that strong, in-group community norms can be counterproductive to engagement with a wider universe of people. And I've met people here who've done inspiring levels of personal self-sacrifice to do good in the world, people who've given their kidneys away, things like that. And if you can do that, you can learn to tie a tie, learn to do a firm handshake and look people in the eye. And I know it's difficult. I mean, I genuinely don't mean to trivialize that kind of thing, except to say that it actually is important how you present to other people and whether they read you as meeting their expectations of someone who's coming to pitch them something serious.
Matt gave me this talk this morning, and I said to my speaker handler, "Can you find me a jacket? I don't own one."
And life is different in California, and I know that, and I recognize that. But when you reach the conclusion that certain things maybe do have to be addressed in the policy domain, that's what you get.
So EA is kind of stepping into the policy domain now, with lots of money coming in, lots of people trying to engage in elections and policy. And I feel like we're probably making a lot of clumsy mistakes because many of us aren't coming from the policy world and just, don't know how we're coming across, don't know which sacred things we're stepping on.
Yeah, I think it's challenging, right? You don't do anything in life without making mistakes, and that's fine, and it's a kind of a learning experience. I do think that there has been, I'm not sure people have taken seriously enough the fact that other people are inherently suspicious of a new group of people that shows up with new piles of money. And, very specifically, right? There are people I know, friends of mine, frankly, who are serious people in politics, who they will say, this whole thing, guarding against pandemics, all of this is, it's a con job to do lobbying for cryptocurrency, right? And if you know the relevant people or the relevant community, that seems so clearly wrong that it's hard to engage with it or take it seriously, or you get very defensive. But it's totally, if you think about the level of analytic scrutiny that EAs would give to other people who were making bold claims about themselves, it's natural, right? And there's going to have to be work done to convince people of the sort of good faith that's made in this arena, especially because, in an election, right, you by definition have an opponent who has self-interested reasons to raise doubts about you.
So if a couple years from now EA was doing better in policy, what would that look like? Would we be more popular? Would we not be more popular, but we know who in secret Congress gets things done?
Yeah, I think there's a few modes of change that you want to see. One is you would like to see a handful of true champions, right? Real workhorse members who deeply care about some of the EA issues and work really hard on it in an earnest way. Then the other is, frankly, a larger circle of opportunists who have just heard that this is a thing, that there's some money in it, that there's some people who care, and that they should kind of bandwagon with a sort of a rising force. And then the outermost circle is a kind of a halo of vague good vibes in which somebody is I maybe disagree with these people, but I accept that they mean what they say, that they in fact do care about this stuff, and I maybe just care about something else, right? And, so I don't think that you're ever going to see or need to see like a mass movement, and people are out there and they're like marching and demanding dramatic changes in these kind of policies. But you do want to see at least some people who are really, really fired up, and then a larger group of people who are like broadly okay with it. Although it does, it differs by policy area. I mean, if you think about animal welfare concerns, I think that by the nature of how that works, sort of mass opinion is very, very relevant. Other things are much more technical and much more elite-driven.
One of the most technical EA cause areas, which I know you at least used to be skeptical, maybe less so now, is the AI stuff. Is there do you have thoughts on what doing AI policy and AI communications would look like?
I mean, it's tough. It's a tough issue. You've beaten me down over the years. And,
I try.
And Holden Karnofsky came out here maybe a year ago and, told me, like, you got to take this more seriously, Matt. I think it's, it's challenging when you deal with super technical areas, because I don't want to say you're asking people to take these ideas on pure faith, but you're asking people to take ideas on some amount of faith, to defer to a community of experts. And it's a contested zone among well-informed people. So you can't, I can't say to my audience, or you can't say to me, look, every single person who does advanced AI research agrees that this is a big problem. In fact, a big part of the problem is that they don't agree, right? So that's tricky. At the same time, I actually think, I know that a lot of the real AI heads don't like the science fiction references that people make, but I think the fact that there is this well-established actual reservoir of deep cultural concern about this subject is a leverage point that can be taken advantage of. I mean, even if the details of a Terminator robot walking around doesn't make a lot of sense, people have been concerned that artificial life is an existential threat to humanity since before there were microchips. So it's actually a comprehensible idea. And I do think that we're going to have to just make runs at talking about the question in a first order way, rather than first having a philosophy seminar about the nature of the long term and things like that. I think it's more productive to just try and pitch people, give me your best shot at a layperson's explanation of what the issue is, and you take a few bites at that apple.
Audience question: does EA have an aesthetics problem?
An aesthetics problem? No, I mean it's not a problem, but it's an issue, right? There's. There's an aesthetic, there's a vibe, so I haven't been to an EAG before. I'm pretty familiar, I think, with EA doctrine and EA causes and stuff like that. But I came here and I was really not a complaint about the app swap card, which I know a lot of people do, but the concept that you would book brief conversations one-on-one, because I've been to conferences and everybody knows it's the conference isn't really about the panels, we're just wasting all your time here. It's about the networking and the meeting people. But then when I came here, I was okay, I understand. They have thoughtfully tried to engineer a conference that suits the dispositions of people who are maybe more introverted than the average, conference-going person, other term, things that are used, and that's good. That's a strength of a community and it reflects its values, but it does also project an aesthetic to the world that is at odds with the way most conferences operate. And I think you want, at some point, not this event, but some future event in DC, something where a lot of people who aren't in the community stop by and talk, because they're curious, because they've heard there's a lot of action here, and they do come to the panels or they chat with people. And you probably want to organize something like that in a way that fits the established norms of the going to conferences in Washington, D.C. community, if that's what you want to do, right? Because there's, these things arise out of Oxford, where I've never been, and the Bay Area, which I find odd, and I just think nothing wrong with it. Like, tastes differ, but it's like if you want to engage the whole world, and this is to say nothing of, right, like, what happens like in India? I don't know. I don't know anything about India, but like it's probably quite different from the United States of America, and you need different aesthetics, different norms to get more and more people in.
Yeah, everybody in EA agrees that EA is too much of a monoculture, and everybody in EA agrees EA should have more intellectual diversity and more.
Well, see, I don't know intellectual diversity, right? The question is like, does the do the ideas need to be so aligned with like particular like personality types, right?
Mm-hmm. Another thing I got asked about a lot at this conference, I don't know about you, is like, should I start an EA media thing? And as like about the only person here who started a successful media thing, I wonder like who should start a media thing? Should we be starting EA media things? Should there be Vox, but even more Vox? Like,
don't you have an EA media thing?
Yeah, but it's at Vox. Should we have more of them? Should we have 10?
I mean, people should start. I mean, I think especially anybody who has ideas that. You know, Kelsey and I both in our different ways, we write words on the internet. But there's a lot of other media. Like if you have ideas about video, about TikToks, about things like that, like we're not doing, there's very little in that space. And there's a lot of upside. And I think we know as a rule, I mean, going back to the 1940s, that like video is more popular than words. That's how people preferred, not me, but you know, other people prefer to engage with things, and it's worth working on. I think that in terms of, you know, broadly speaking, text on things, I think that what would be better than EA media would be people who are aligned with EA values doing regular media. Right? And just sort of bringing attention to these neglected topics in forums that already have audiences. Because I don't think we particularly need new outlets for EA people to consume more information about. I think like EA people are quite well informed about EA. And what we need to do is inform like other people about the specific subject areas that people in this room are working on.
I feel like there's like a unifying theme here where you're like, go to where the people are doing their thing.
To the people. There was these like Russian socialists, the Narodniks, who were, it was the to the people movement, and that's what I want to see. It didn't work for them.
Audience question. Okay, so how can EA improve perception among major media outlets? Like, when you talk to media people, what are they sort of suspicious about? What isn't resonating? Where are we like unpersuasive aside from the seats?
You know, what's unpersuasive? You know, I mean, I do think that there has to be some more like direct engagement with the crypto question. I think ideally the way to address that is just to diversify the funding base, right? You know, you want to recruit like 6 or 7 more billionaires, and then you know, there's a lot of great billionaires out there. I'm a billionaire positivity, and you got to bring them into the fold. The other thing is, you know, I mean, there's just journalists. You probably have experienced this, but like journalists are like suspicious haters, and that's kind of our function in society, is like to be society's haters. And it's a little bit unavoidable, but it does also mean that when I think people perceive that there's like someone trying to like cheat and cut corners, right? I got questions from people who've written books, and they're like, how did Will McCaskill get this much book publicity? You know, and like, I don't know how, but you know, it was somehow, like people helped him, and then you can have like weird resentments and just like more suspicion. And I don't know exactly how you fix that, but to like try not to get too down about it and just like keep engaging with people in a consistent patient, open-hearted way, and at least understand that it's going to look odd to outsiders.
I think the thing I would add to that is that journalists are haters, and we're also kind of lazy. So like if things are superficially very bad, you can't expect like a lot of work to figure out what's actually going on. And if there's like a nice, clear explanation of what you're doing with like people who we can contact who will answer our phone calls and then explain what they're doing to us, it goes a lot better. And like,
yes,
a lot of people in EA are like, don't talk to the press. And like, I understand where that's coming from, but if there's nobody who will talk to the journalists, then the journalists will not like get your perspective on things, and the articles will not reflect you.
I do think that's true. It's like, I tell people all the time in different spheres of life, it's like the only thing worse than engaging with the press is not engaging with the press. Because like, it's true, like things can go horribly wrong when you talk to reporters, but if you don't, it's like guaranteed to go horribly. Because there's no way to have, I'm a proponent of like getting things done under the radar, but there's no way to get things done completely under the radar. I mean, if you make a difference in the world, people are going to notice that, and they're going to like want to say something about it.
Yeah, and if there's like people willing to explain what you're doing, and those people are easy to find and talk to, then explanations of what you're doing will tend to make it into articles about you. And if it's like very hard to find anybody who will talk about you, that looks really suspicious in itself to a lot of journalists who are not used to crowds that are that anti-journalist. And like, you know, then it's a lot harder to figure out what you're about. And if it's a lot harder, a lot of journalists won't do it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I mean, there's certain just like conspiratorial modes of action that raise suspicions.
Well, we have a question about policy communities in other countries. I don't know much about that. I don't know if you know much about that. Like,
I don't know. Which countries?
It just asks, it says, are effective altruism global? What should we be doing to service the long tail of policy communities in other countries?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's you know, different countries have different political institutions, and they have different sort of modes of action. I mean, one thing I've heard specifically from people in Canada and Australia is that the just like general policy advocacy infrastructure in those countries is much less, there's just like less to it than there is in the United States. I mean, not just because they're smaller countries, but you know, Canada is like 1/10 the population of the United States, but has less than 1/10 the amount of advocacy happening there, in part because there's a suction to the, you know, imperial metropole here, but that potentially means that there's like neglectedness in these other kinds of areas. But then, like, I don't understand how the European Union works at all. I went to Brussels once on like a tour that was supposed to explain it to American journalists, so we would stop explaining it wrong, but it didn't make any sense to me. So
I tried to understand it in a very, very narrow context. I was trying to understand the bans on plant-based meat labeling in the EU, because I think like people should be able to sell almond milk and call it almond milk or whatever. But just that issue, like which regulatory body was issuing regulations and who got to vote on them and who got input on them, and like who had like set the directive that somebody would like make the regulatory body in the first place. And I'm sure all of this is learnable, but I don't know it, and probably someone should.
If you actually Google it, there's a really funny, it's just like the flow chart that's on the EU website of how the legislative process works is comical. I don't.
Top question is now, are progressives becoming more hostile to EA? How can this be avoided?
Well, I don't know that they're becoming more hostile to EA. They're perhaps becoming more like aware that it exists, and therefore there's hostility. I mean, I know an important thing about how the media works is that, you know, if there's a publication that's not Vox and people are around a table and they're like, what's up with these EAs? And there's 30 people around the table and 27 of them are like, I never even heard of this, who cares? 2 of them are like, it seems fine, it seems good, they're helping people. And one guy's like, here's a hot take about why they're going to destroy the world and they're awful. That's the piece that will run, even if it's not reflective of the opinions in the room, even if the assigning editor doesn't think it's true, just because that's the most interesting pitch, right? Like, oh, these people seem pretty well-meaning. I hope they do some good in the world. It's not a good article, right? Even if it's true, and that's not a challenge for EA. Like, that's a challenge for everybody, right? And to an extent, like, I think we should try to alter the epistemic practices in journalism to not have quite that level of like haterade. But I think that you got to kind of like, don't let the bastards grind you down about this sort of thing, and just like keep going out there and try to elevate like more positive stories.
What is the number one issue, cause, idea associated with EA that you would like to have time to learn more about or write more about?
I'm trying to learn more about AI governance to the extent that I can, and it's a challenging subject, but it seems important. I mean, and frankly, it's a topic that's clearly important, even if the AI X-risk people are like completely wrong, right? Like, AI is developing at a very rapid pace. It is starting to change certain industries. It clearly is going to change more and more industries over time. And I think most people have, and myself included, have very little understanding of those issues and what's happening in society. And of course, if we're all extinct in 20 years, then we'll really wish we had. We wish we spent less time thinking about it and more time just partying. I don't know.
One thing I kind of, the AI governance space really bothers me, honestly. Like, you hear pretty often from mainstream politicians, like, yeah, I'm starting to like pay attention to AI, with GPT-3 and DALL-E and all of that. And I love the recommendations about how to regulate this effectively. And I get that how do you regulate this effectively is a very hard problem, but it feels like a very hard problem we should have been on like 5 years ago, like as soon as it became clear that deep learning might kind of go all the way. And it feels to me like EA would have a lot of credibility if, the first time you asked me, okay, what policy should be done about AI, there'd been an answer other than like, yeah, we'll get back to you in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, people have started to get back to me a little bit. I mean, I've learned
been a couple of years.
I've learned some ideas here about antitrust, about export controls, about not the AI itself or even the chips that it runs on, but the machines that are in the foundries that make the chips. So, I mean, it's good to see some ongoing development of specifics. Unfortunately, I mean, policy change tends to be slow, and computer development tends to be fast. And this has been the dilemma for every regulatory proposal in just like computers for the past generation, is that the pace of advancement is running ahead of the ability of a political system to process it. So, I mean, I do think really complicated international coordination schemes seem like they are not that promising. But I mean, I do wonder, and I think people are going to have to explore, are there sort of crude international collaborations that will just lead to a slowdown that then helps buy some space for other kinds of policies? I don't know. I mean, I just talked to two people about that today. Maybe it's doomed.
My perspective is that a slowdown that buys space for other policies would be a really good outcome, and also that like among policy people, like there is not like, we should definitely be pushing for that, because a slowdown is definitely unpopular with the tech companies we want to like us and stuff. I don't know, from your perspective, is that like a big cost, or is it like you push for the regulations you actually need and the companies like complain and are fine?
I mean, I think that the big tech companies are less politically influential than some people might think. It's in this scope of like industries in America, right? The incredible geographical concentration of major tech companies in just 2 states actually makes them more vulnerable to like political defeat. If you want to see like a lobby that is like unbreakable, it's car dealership owners, which like fortunately is not that important. But you look at like when Dodd-Frank was passed, like auto loans have a special exemption. Like every law that comes, there's a special carve out for car dealerships. Whereas like there's like a bill that tech companies hate that's pending in Congress that is probably going to pass. Now, as it happens, it will not meaningfully reduce X risk from AI, but it's like a proof of concept that like their political clout is, I think, not like the greatest issue in the world. I think the biggest concern with any kind of slowdown, right, is you have differential impacts on the United States or China, and then that's a whole other story.
And if it's not a hardware slowdown, then maybe you create hardware overhangs. And there's definitely a lot to think about. I guess I do feel like EA should have thought about all of that, like, years ago, and like that's a pretty significant mistake that like as soon as GPT-2 came out, there wasn't someone like writing, this is the policy paper for if deep learning goes all the way, how we're like going to like do regulation at various stages.
And the other incredible weak spot that's relevant to that conversation is just like penetration into China and understanding of China. I mean, I think it was knowable a long time in the past that China is a big country, or, right, like, China's policy is important in the future. I mean, and a lot of people, you know, anybody, if you just like said that in 2002, people are like, yeah, that seems true. But it's like, what was actually done, right, to like have outreach there, to have dialogue, to have understanding of the basic like concepts that we've developed? Like, do any people in, I mean, there's the PRC as a regime, but there's also like a sinosphere of people who read and write and talk in Chinese dialects. And like, are these ideas accessible to them at all? Is there any purchase at all of what these concerns are? Because, you know, if you look at the US-Soviet Cold War, right, I mean, one of the reasons why we did not have a large-scale global nuclear war is that Soviet people like also thought that a large-scale nuclear exchange was something that might happen as a result of the Cold War, and they agreed that that was undesirable, right? And so then, like, you could collaborate. And if it had been that, like, somehow nobody in Russia had, like, noticed that this was bad, right, that nothing would have worked if not for the fact that there was a consensus on that level.
I think that it's tricky because it is hard to make the case AI might kill us all without the case AI is extremely important, and if you are a geopolitical opponent of the US, you probably don't want us doing it first. I think if we were like, AI is dangerous, so we're slowing down, that's a message you can send credibly. But if you're like, AI is dangerous, we are not slowing down, we are full steam ahead. Like it's a geopolitically tenuous combination of messages to send.
I mean, as an official US government, yes.
No, but even unofficially, like people will notice if you're saying this is super dangerous and also the society you're in is doing it.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's bleak. We should talk about something else.
All right.
Let's help some egg-laying chickens.
The audience asked, should we be trying to bring older people into the movement? If so, how?
Older people?
Yeah, like you, elderly. Like.
Yeah, no. I mean, I do think that that's really important. I mean, I think that a lot of EA emphasis conceptually is on like recruiting like bright young things in school and then giving them advice on what career choices to prioritize. And that's good, like that's important stuff, but I think is maybe at this point like overdone relative to there's people who are just like, they're living their lives, they're probably not gonna have like radical change in direction because they're already people of some influence and importance in the world, right? And how can you talk to people like that and get them to be, you know, 5-10% like more EA in their conduct and in their thinking? And, you know, when you are engaged with that problem, I think some of the things that I see obsessively debated on EA Forum about like strict priority ranking become much less important because for any given person, like what actual trade-offs you face are not necessarily like aligned with like a global stack ranking. And people who are just constantly arguing about most important this, most important that, are not engaging with the question of what's the most important thing like you person can do right now? How can you do better? How can I be convincing with my like object level take about this or that? And you know, I mean, you see this in your work, right? I mean, like you guys don't just like write all your articles on the same subject because it's the most important subject, because like nobody would read it then, right? Like that wouldn't be useful. And also pixels aren't scarce, right? Yeah. Like you can write an article about something that's of lesser significance and it's still okay.
Yeah, that's actually something I'm excited about saying from the stage at EA Global. I think it's pretty bad idea to like try and figure out what you should be doing in your career with reference to like only the list of the important things and not to your own strengths. I spent a while when I was an EA undergrad being like, well, the done thing is earning to give. This was a long time ago. And so I guess I'll be a programmer. They make a lot of money. I'm a really, really mediocre programmer. And it's just like, this is more welcoming to people who are farther in their careers. But like, if there's something you have the potential to be exceptional at, you should be doing that, even if it's like something a little bit outside the current wheelhouse. And I also like have seen just so many different careers go from being outside the wheelhouse to being like, oh, we desperately need more of those, that like the idea of telling people who have a career path that they're like getting traction on or something they're really good at to do something else, it's like, look, for all we know, 5 years from now, we'll be like, oh, we don't need any of those and we need a lot of the thing that you wanted to be. Like,
right. Well, and like, I don't think at any point in the trajectory of EA, people were like, what you really ought to do is try to be like an admiral, right? But we're now dealing with subjects where like it would actually be super helpful for like the head of Pacific Command to be like, this is how we need to think about things.
Yeah.
And, you know, which is not because like the Navy is unique, but just that like excelling in almost any area will put you in a position to do things that are influential and significant,
yeah,
versus like beating your head against the wall, even if it's like an amazing wall. Like, what are you going to achieve that way?
Yeah, I think that if there is something you have the potential to be exceptional at, EA should be like, yes, go do that. Like, we have a lot of people. We all of the walls are getting, you know, beaten against by 100 hands. And if that beats down the wall, then like, cool, right? Because some of those walls, we don't have anybody who's like, ah, yes, that's my perfect wall. But if there's something you're really good at, yeah, go do that.
It's just unfortunate if the thing you're good at is tweeting. And then just antagonize people all day.
By definition, EA will always be focusing on topics that are neglected. Will this engender a permanent state of suspicion? How do we avoid that? I actually have a take on that one. I think that like we currently are like much more sketchy than we like have to be. Like, I think the crypto thing is like kind of random and makes things look wildly more sketchy than if our second big billionaire had happened to make his fortune in anything else except oil. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I also just think like diversity of funding sources is significant, right? I mean, there's various takes go on. There's, you know, like not funding constrained, but we're talent constrained. But it's like you're always funding constrained if somebody can count on one hand, like who the funders are, because there's no way to be like totally credible that you're not like under the thumb of that source of money. Whereas like if you have, you know, 36 major streams of funding, then it's just like actually, I mean, you know, I've worked in nonprofits, right? And that's the way it goes. Like if you have one single major donor, then you always have a problem, right? Whereas if you have a diverse stream of funding, then it's like, look, like these people believe our organization does good work. If one of them happens to walk away, it's like, look, you can't make everybody happy all the time, but we'll just find somebody else. And so I think that that's a major, it's a credibility issue. I mean, it also just leaves any institution vulnerable to like mistakes of judgment, even if they're made in good faith.
I think there's like a thing you notice in people who are pursuing grants where like they have a pretty good model of these specific funders at OpenPhil who they'd be talking to and what they want, or of the people at FTX who they'd be talking to and what they want. And I would kind of love a world where like there's 20 of those people and you don't need to like specifically learn their worldview exactly. Not that the funders generally don't want you to do this. The funders are generally like, we consider this a big problem we're trying to avoid. But the way to like not have that problem is like, yeah, the money just kind of, you know.
Well, and there's this funny tick now where everyone's like, because we recognize we're fallible, we're going to fund a prize for criticisms of ourselves. And like, okay, but like the real way to immunize yourself against like blind spots and things like that is just to like have multiple players in the game, not to be like constantly berating yourself in some oddball way. And I think it's like, I think people are doing what they can in that regard, but it's an inherent weakness of resting on ultimately a narrow foundation of money.
I like the FTX Change Our Minds About AI contest. I think there is like a chance I will be able to win that one and buy a house in the Bay Area, so that they should keep doing that one. But
there you go. That's the dream.
I also think the criticisms and those are often really good. I often read them and I'm I'm really glad there was a prize for this because it was good. But in terms of the optics, in terms of convincing people outside the movement that you're thoughtful, they're weird enough they don't really work, which isn't an argument against doing them for non-optic reasons. It's just a thing to keep in mind if you're but look how much criticism we do of ourselves. People will just think you're weird.
Yeah, because it's weird.
Do you think GPTs will disrupt or change how you personally write and communicate in the coming years? I want to end on that one because we're almost out of time, and that sounds like a fun one.
I mean, probably. I mean, something that I always remember is my mother was a graphic designer at Newsweek when I was a kid. She was an analog era graphic designer. She had a bag of sharp knives and all this rubber. She would cut and paste things with knives and paste, and that was how she did graphic design. And her job more or less went away, and she relearned how to be a digital graphic designer, but she didn't retain the same level of status and earnings power in that transition. And I mean, it seems quite likely that is going to happen in the field of text writing, even without a full supplanting of the journalism stack. What's the valuable part of it will shift. I mean, I personally write very quickly, and that is a skill that in my mom's time would not have been that useful, because they were dealing with a very constrained publication pipeline. The internet comes along, it's super useful because it's
you have your takes fast.
Blue sky, and I do things fast, and it's good. In a world where, okay, what we really need is skillful sort of manipulators of GPT-4 who kind of give it good prompts, then I think writing fast becomes once again a very devalued skill relative to other things, at which point, I don't know what. I wish that I had some other marketable skills. Podcasting.
Yeah, the AIs will have a hard time with podcasting. I'm sure they can't make sounds with their little computer.
Never.
This is fun. Lots of EAs think that most journalists have really bad, shallow takes on lots of things. How far do you agree? Why might that be? And can it be improved?
Really bad takes on lots of things?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That is.
And there's most takes are bad. There's most takes on most topics are bad.
Well, so
most people have bad takes.
But I also want to offer a thought that I gave to a CEO who was complaining to me about why is all these articles so bad, and to flip it around, it's why would the articles ever be good, right? If you think about something you do in your job, right, and it's if you're a computer programmer and you work on some system that people use, well, if the software breaks, then your customers can't use the product and the company's going to lose money, right? If your car, if Teslas catch fire too much, then they're not going to sell them anymore. An article being wrong is fine. Nothing bad happens as a result of the articles being wrong, which is on you, the audience, right? If people only read good articles, then there would be no financial incentive to write bad ones. But it's on some level, some of us are trying as hard as we can to make the articles good. Some maybe aren't, but there's relatively weak, objective incentive for articles to be true and insightful, and that's not our fault. It's the fault of the customers who buy crap all the time. If nobody cared whether or not their car exploded, there would be exploding cars everywhere.
I will say one thing, which is that Vox, at least, we knew which people, when you wrote about them, would be super picky and like send over a bunch of demands for corrections, and like which topics like would get a really strong response. And people were more careful when they were writing about like someone who was like going to be like, that's inaccurate. So I think that you can actually do some like consumer advocacy for better journalism by like responding to inaccurate stuff with like detailed, annoying emails that are like, this is actually inaccurate. Can I get you to make a correction? You will make the journalists very sad. They probably won't make a correction if it wasn't really blatant, but they will keep in mind that like that topic or that question is one where they want to be really meticulously correct.
It's a community of complainers. Yes, you will respond. No, but I mean, this is the same as what I'm saying, right? It's like people respond to the situation that exists out there. You could send a nice email to someone who wrote a good article and make them feel happy. I never get nice emails.
I get nice emails, and they're always like, they give the impression of being typed by someone who's a little, like, typing is a little bit hard because they're quite short and they have like a couple of typos, and they're like, this was very good, Kelsey, thank you. And I'm like, I appreciate that. And also, I don't know.
Well, there you go. Yeah, spread the love.
We are out of time. Thank you all so much for coming to EA Global, to this talk. Thank you for all of the stuff that I assume you are doing to make the world better and make it keep existing and stuff. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks.